Make It Right, the manufacturing podcast.
The image of the entrepreneur or the leader is someone who stands apart from the crowd. They're just a little bit alone, a little bit outside the fray. They're expected to have answers, to know where they're going, and to bring everyone along in a wave of enthusiasm and focus. But leadership and entrepreneurship isn't for the faint of heart. And my guest this week knows it. Welcome to the Make It Right podcast. I'm Janet Eastman, and today I'm pleased to have John Jantsch on the show. He's an entrepreneur and a business owner for more than 3 decades, and he is also a best-selling author whose latest offering is a collection of 366 readings and quotes from great classic authors such as Thoreau, Emerson, and Whitman. These daily meditations are designed to inspire and challenge the reader, the leader, and the entrepreneur. The book is called The Self Reliant Entrepreneur, and I'm pleased to have John Jantsch as my guest. Welcome to the show, John.
Well, thanks for having me. And as I listened to you describe the entrepreneur, the business leader, I think there's a lot of myths and misperceptions about the fact that we're all just really a hot mess most days.
Well, sometimes we are, and sometimes we aren't, right? So I'm curious, John, you've written a number of books. All of the previous ones have been directed at marketing.
Yeah.
What prompted you to write The Self Reliant Entrepreneur?
No, you're right. This is actually my 6th book, and my first 5 books were squarely about some how-to of marketing. I just, as I've stayed in this longer and longer, and as more and more information gets out there, I think we have all the how-to information that we need. I mean, you could Google a YouTube video, to pretty much learn how to do anything. But where I think we still lack sometimes is the why to, or the mindset about, running a business, because I think a lot of people underestimate how important that aspect of it is. So I wanted to write a book that is really, in fact, I sometimes refer to it as a practice. It's kind of a daily work on yourself, before you go out there and kind of face the world approach.
Yeah, so you have an interesting format to this book. So first of all, before we talk about the actual format, tell me why you decided to write it this way. It's a daily thing. I'm assuming that you want the listener or the reader rather to pick it up first thing in the morning, read that, and kick their day off that way. But explain why you chose this format.
Yeah, honestly, I think a lot of books or a lot of authors would say this, I hope anyways. I wrote kind of the book I wanted to have. This is, a morning routine of kind of getting myself centered and ready for the day is something I've done for probably 20 years. Julia Cameron's book called The Artist's Way, which, look it up if you're not familiar with it, kind of got me journaling 25 years ago when that book came out. And I've always had my own practice of doing some sort of reading that I felt kind of got me inspired for the day. And so I kind of wrote the book that I wanted to fit into my morning routine.
Okay, so I think you're going to describe or actually read a page for us. So read a page for us, and then let's break it down.
Sure. So every day starts with a title of the page or the offering that day. And then I also kind of built the foundation around, as you mentioned, some mid-19th century literature, which I think is still today the greatest entrepreneur literature ever written. Then there's some cases 100 to 200 words by me. I think today is actually a shorter one. And then I end it with a challenge question, something to take out there. Maybe we don't have the answer right then, but something to kind of take with you for the day. So this is January 21st when we are recording this, so I'll read January 21st. The wonder of things. And I will show you that there is no imperfection in the present and can be none in the future. And I will show you that whatever happens to anybody, it may be turned to beautiful results. And I will show you that nothing can happen more beautiful than death. And I will thread a thread through my poems that time and events are compact, and that all things of the universe are perfect miracles, each as profound as any. That's from Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass that originally was written in 1855. I guess he continued to add to it until he died. But I then go on to say, in his popular book, Stumbling to Happiness, author Daniel Gilbert states, wonderful things are especially wonderful the first time they happen, but their wonderfulness wanes with repetition. When we begin or plan our entrepreneurial journey, we are full of wonder. So, how are you feeling about it today? Miracles, wonderful things, beautiful results happen around us every day if we let them. Your challenge question for today: what miracle will you witness today?
So that is a page for today. And if I'm the reader and I've read that, do you want me to answer that challenge instantly at the end of it, like after I've read that? Or is it something that you go through your day and then you fill in that challenge with that thought in your head, like, I've got to figure out what is the most important challenge to take on today?
I guess I just hope that this book inspires you to go to work on yourself. I don't care how you do it. I've had people tell me, I read one day and then I read ahead a few days. I have people tell me, I just pick the book up and flip open to a day and just read that. So there's so many ways to consume this. And then I think the other thing that you'll find is if you stick with it and you read day after day, there will be certain days that you go, wow, John was talking about me. How did he know? It's just going to hit you, and it's going to be the thing that you've been struggling with, or you didn't know you were struggling with until maybe you ran across that question that you couldn't answer. So that's kind of the ironic thing about writing a book about telling people to be self-reliant. The self part's kind of on you, but I do know because I've gotten a lot of feedback from people that sometimes people will journal about the question and they'll really work on it for 20, 30 minutes. And then other people will say, that's interesting. And then something will happen during the day that kind of goes, oh, that's what we were talking about. Or, that's how I respond in a way that maybe is not as healthy, as it should be. So, there is no prescription here. It's really just meant to be a practice and a journey. And, we'll see where it takes you.
I guess I was going to ask you, how do you want people to use this book? But I guess ultimately what you're doing every day is kind of planting a seed,
Yeah.
and it's all up to the reader to figure out if that seed germinates for that day or it doesn't, right?
Yeah, because there is no. I mean, you don't take this book on vacation and come back and go, "I got it now." It's really a process or a practice, and uh, I think the first step, if you come across something where you think, I need to change that, or I need to do that differently, or I need to trust myself more, to make decisions that are right for me, or kind of whatever spark gets lit. I think you have to start witnessing how it's showing up, day to day, before you can make any kind of change or what it's costing you to not make that change. I think that's always the first step, and so that's why I call this or talk about this as a practice, because I think it's something that you come back month after month of just 2 minutes a day, and I think that you're just going to find it's like a lot of healthy practices. You're just going to find that it's having positive impact.
I think it's really interesting too that you've pulled from authors going, as far back as 150 years, possibly even more. There was a lot of wisdom back there that it's kind of surprising when you look at our lives now and everything that we have and the technology and whatnot. They were talking about, some of them anyway, going and finding a place of solitude. And
Yeah.
I'm like, must have been pretty easy to find solitude back then, because it certainly isn't easy now. So you can go somewhere and actually think.
Yeah, in some ways, I mean, we can debate whether or not it was easier then or not, because in some ways, you they were killing food and making their clothes and making their houses and things. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
we don't
true.
have to
That's
deal
true.
with any of that stuff anymore. So I think that we can debate what was hard or easy, but I think the technology is just a distraction. I think the human condition is what it's always been. The reason I think so much great writing came out of that period, though, is if you think about what was going on in 1850 or so, we were on the cusp of the Civil War. Women were marching in the streets to get a right to vote. We were trying to abolish the horrendous practice of human slavery. It was kind of the first countercultural period in America where all of a sudden you had writers, preachers, like Emerson saying, you know what, maybe we shouldn't listen to our parents or the preachers or the teachers or, our elders. Maybe we need to actually think for ourselves. And maybe even if it costs us, we need to pursue, what is our unique path. And so you had people like Emerson and Thoreau and Margaret Fuller, overtly writing, those types of things. But I also cite a lot of the fiction from that era, because books like Scarlet Letter and Moby Dick and even Tom Sawyer had protagonists that were very much self-reliant. They again made the decision to follow their heart, even if it sort of cost them publicly or in their status. And I think that it's a great message for entrepreneurs, and I think it just came from a time period where there was a lot of upheaval.
You've actually been in business for 30 years. You've been an entrepreneur for a really long time. When you look back over those 30 years, has the challenge of being an entrepreneur changed that much?
No, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's gotten easier. I mean, if I think a couple things sort of converge. You experience a level of success. You get happy with where you are, with what you have today, and I think those things kind of merge into a much more peaceful journey. Sometimes when you are starting up, you're still struggling with, is this the right thing? Have I found my purpose? What is this failure here to teach me? I mean, all those kind of seasons of the entrepreneur that I kind of structure the book around. And I think, if I'm going to kind of point to myself, I think I'm like a lot of entrepreneurs or people that stick with it for a long time. I'm in that season where I'm thinking about, what difference have I made? What impact have I had? And I think that, again, I've been doing it for a long time. I get up every single day, as cliche as it sounds, and I'm excited about what I get to do. And I think that will carry you a heck of a long way.
Yeah. What are the key challenges that you see entrepreneurs struggling with now? Because I'm sure you're meeting a lot of them and talking to them. What are the key challenges that are out there right now in the 21st century?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs, I don't know that this is, in the times that we live in, the biggest challenge, but for a lot of entrepreneurs, the distraction of comparison. So you see, other people doing something. You see all the stuff on social media that makes you feel like, well, I'm not as successful as all of those people, or why did they get the big interview, or the big successful launch, or whatever it is they're comparing themselves to. And I think that's that worrying about kind of the future and the past, as opposed to living in the moment, is really robbing a lot of us of the joy and happiness that being an entrepreneur can bring.
There's a lot of talk right now in leadership and entrepreneurship. Guys like Gary Vee are talking about it. You're talking about it. It's about the entrepreneur needs to look inside, and then from there, bring out that passion. You've done that. So tell me what it feels like to actually get there.
Well, Janet, you're never there.
Oh,
Let's
no
be clear about
destination.
that.
Okay.
But I think that I at least have come to the conclusion that entrepreneurship is really one of the greatest self-development programs ever created. And I think if you look at it that way, that your life is a work in progress, and that your only real job is to continue to experience things and continue to bring value, and continue mainly to do what you believe is what you were meant to do. Every single one of us is unique. I mean, science, down to the DNA, proves that we are all unique, just like every tree and and plant is unique. And given that, I think that our only job is to figure out what our unique purpose is.
So how did you find yours? Because you've written books on marketing.
Yep.
You've done a lot in marketing, and suddenly you've made this turn towards the Self Reliant Entrepreneur book.
Yeah.
Um, has your purpose changed?
No, not at all. And I would suggest that, even though on the surface this book seems very different, I have worked with true small business owners for 30 years, and let me tell you, we can call it marketing, but when you're working with the smallest of businesses, who the owner is being, what they believe in, how their values come across. That's all marketing. So I feel like I've kind of been waiting in this in this particular area, even though we didn't call it marketing, really for my entire career. So I wouldn't say my purpose has changed at all. And you kind of started out by saying, well, how did you find yours? I think what happens is you go out and you experience a lot of things. You stick with things, you are reliable and consistent, and in bringing value or whatever it is that you bring to the world. And I think purpose finds you then.
So I want to take a step back and talk a little bit more about these authors that are in the
Sure.
Self Reliant Entrepreneur, because I'm thinking, you had to find 366 passages from different books
Yeah.
that were going to fit into this book. It must have been a great time seeking them out. Was it difficult?
It was extremely difficult. I feel like I'm sure some professors would beg to differ, but I feel like I got sort of a master's in transcendentalist literature, because I studied it for 6 months probably before I wrote anything. And the big breakthrough, if you will, I started just reading everything and taking notes, and then I realized sort of the size of the project I had taken on. And so kind of the big breakthrough was I had written an article about, I don't know, probably 4 years ago, I called The Seasons of the Entrepreneur. And I talk about kind of it doesn't happen necessarily in a year, but just the various seasons that I've passed through numerous times in, being in business forever. And I think that what that did was that kind of gave me, obviously with the annual, calendar format of the book, the season metaphor was kind of there for the taking. So it allowed me to say, okay, I'm here are the seasons, and here are themes that I think fit into each month of that season. And so with kind of 12 monthly themes, and they're just one word themes, failure and congruence and love. And so I kind of came up with those 12 words. And what that actually gave me was not only a narrative arc for the whole book, but it actually gave me an organizational structure for finding this content. So I knew the time period and many of the authors I wanted to cite. And now with that framework, I was able to say, okay, what did Emerson have to say about congruence? And so it made it much easier for me to find passages and works and even to get into their journals and letters and really deep into their writings to kind of mold the themes and the readings together.
I'm curious to know what impact the whole project had on your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of authors will say that a book changes you in many ways, and this book certainly. I have been on this path for a long time. I mean, a lot of people look at this and say, "Wow, why'd you write this different book?" But I mean, meditation and journaling and reading inspirational works is something that's been a part of my morning routine and ritual for many, many years. And so what this really did was it took a lot of the work, the self-development work that I've done, and really crystallized it and got me, because it was such an intense amount of time and focus, both researching and then writing each of these entries. It really brought greater focus to a lot of the things that I believe and a lot of the things that I have worked on for many, many years. So in a lot of ways, it was a real gift to be able to write this book, but it was also probably the hardest thing I've ever done. It turns out, Janet, it's harder to write short entries
Yeah.
than it is to write for 10 pages.
I'm kind of curious to know if an English teacher anywhere has said to you, I want to use this book
Yeah.
with my high school students or my university students and have them carry this book with them through the year
Yeah.
to see what it does for them. Has anybody approached you in that way?
That's a fabulous idea. Nobody has yet, but I have heard from people that in small groups are discussing it. I've heard from a couple husband and wife teams who work in a business together, who have said that all we ever talk about is the books and who are we going to hire, and so this kind of gave them something deeper and more meaningful to talk about in terms of their, entrepreneurial journey. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I'm just not known in some of those circles. So it may take time to get out into some of those circles. I have actually sent the book to some transcendentalist scholars and things, and I haven't really gotten anybody. This is far too commercial, I think, maybe for them or something. I'm not sure, but I would love to explore that idea. I think that would be uh, some professor that has a class around that, marrying it kind of with here's modern practical thinking around that stuff, as opposed to just you should study this because it's good literature.
Well, and I think some of this is some of the passages and some of the questions that you ask in it, they don't necessarily have to deal just with being an entrepreneur and
That's
being in business. Like they can be used in any way you want during your day. So I just wondered, I thought it was a kind of an interesting thing that maybe somebody would like to do sometime. So, well, good luck if it works.
Well, I was going to say, tell the world, because I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. So, John, tell me, it's the 21st century. What do you believe is the ultimate role of a leader?
um, I probably think small picture more than big picture. I think the ultimate role of a leader, at least in my view, because I don't lead armies of people necessarily, but is to lift other people up, is to help other people realize their potential, whatever that word means for them. And that it's probably the hardest work you'll ever do. It's a whole lot easier to stand around and tell people what to do. But as a leader, realizing that your job is to raise everybody else up takes a tremendous amount of intention.
John, I really like the book. I think it sort of plants a little seed, like I mentioned, in your head every day, makes you really think about certain things. And I wish you good success with it. Congratulations.
Thanks, Janet. It's been fun having a lot of these conversations about stuff other than SEO and websites, which, of course, I love too. But this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet it has. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on the Make It Right podcast. I hope I get a chance to speak with you again.
Thanks, Janet.
That is John Jantsch. He's a business owner and a best-selling author. His latest book is The Self Reliant Entrepreneur. It's in stores now, but if you're also interested in marketing, he has a website called ducttapemarketing.com too. That is our show for this week. I'm Janet Eastman. Thanks very much for listening. Check out our Twitter and LinkedIn feeds that are on our podcast page, lucidI4.com, and subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues through iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. And the Make It Right podcast is brought to you by Kevin Snook, leadership advisor and author of the best-selling book, Make It Right, 5 Steps to Align Your Manufacturing Business from the Front Line to the Bottom Line. I'm Janet Eastman. Thanks for listening to the Make It Right podcast.